fourth time I've tried doing this. January 26th, 2022. There is still a beautiful sunset in the background, glistening on my face. I think I've said that 4 times now. Finally touched the actual button on the camera. Interesting change in the current events. Countries like England and others in Europe are seeming to do a 180-degree pivot on their stance concerning mandates, masks, etc. And while some want to claim success or victory, it should leave us wondering why certain countries are doing this, what would otherwise seem to be out of the blue. And you could maybe make an argument that there has been enough mounting pressure from those exposing truth that suddenly they have decided it will become easier to change the story because they're losing ground, as if they've noticed that they've lost this battle. And that may be a small piece of it, but I encourage you to zoom out on what's really transpiring. And if we're willing to believe, as I certainly do, that there are larger, darker forces at play behind the scenes, even higher up and further behind than the national governments that seem to be calling the shots, then we are led to think and postulate, if one will, that these changes are all designed, so to speak. And may not have been the countries they originally thought, but perhaps it's a manipulation of a larger, more sinister sort. And what I mean is, this has all been a test to gauge public reaction to anything that they do. And they might be making some things up on the fly in regards to how far they can get away with X, Y, or Z, and then they adjust and then continue. But that could explain why we saw some countries locked down to different severity levels as opposed to other countries. Remember, it was only certain countries supposedly that had their leaders come outright, some countries in Africa that were really rejecting things wholesale, and then those leaders just disappeared and actually died. Whereas when we looked at the severity of things, say, in different states in the country or different countries, Sweden versus Canada per se, where the intensity of the mandates and the lockdowns seemed to differentiate, we were led to believe that there was actually autonomous decisions being made within those countries. But if we continue to hold to the truth that there's a larger, darker force at play, that may explain why there are select chosen few countries now, like England, that seems to be revoking their otherwise strict lockdown and mandates 180 degrees overnight in the last 24 hours, and now news channels are coming out and saying, you know, this might not be true, that might be true. First of all, anyone that thinks they were just making a casual mistake has their head very much in the sand. All of these institutions, and by that I do mean governing bodies or the NGOs or established entities that seem to be bureaucratic or technocratic, de facto kind of governing decision-making policies, WHO, you know, World Economic Forum, CDC, you take your pick, NIH. They know very much what they are doing, and the decisions that they are making is only going to appear to the casual observer that these are random or sudden. So as they reverse some of their decisions, they're just gauging people's reaction and perhaps going to see how much people want to go back to normal. Or they got enough pushback that they are now going to pivot towards a different fill in the blank. Could be a different industry, so to speak. We may see more of the constraint-driven policies through weather, which again would be coming back to the global warming piece of it. It is all being orchestrated. These minor successes are merely their tweaking of the dial. And all that was kind of a long drawn out blather to say, do not accept success or victory until the very establishment of government crumbles. Just because they are changing their tune about the narrative of what's transpiring does not mean that they are actually changing the tune of how they feel although that's ironic because they're psychopaths and they don't really feel, of how they desire to control us to the bitter end. Okay? Just as I've spoken about previously, that there is a, not just a false awakening, but a short-sighted awakening, that people that are opening the door or peeling back the layer on one piece of the puzzle and then stopping there, they're plateauing there, when in reality they need to go all the way, open all the doors, peel back all the layers, disintegrate and obliviate every single paradigm, their belief in religion, money, politics, government, etc., you name it, until one realizes that the only thing that governs them, the only thing they have control over is themselves, and that no other entity has any rights to control any other entity. We are all sovereign beings. Until we make that full realization and call for nothing short of the absolute dissolution of all government, anarchy, again broken down into anarchon, no masters, no slaves, no rulers. You've been led a lie and fed a very sickly syrup if you believe that any individual has the right to govern and control any other individual. So, yes, we can be glad that these ridiculous restraints are being lifted, but don't stop there. Use that as the momentum to demand that every other restraint becomes lifted, including the very existence of the government that issued the restraint and restrictions to begin with. Okay? So don't be lulled into this false sense of any kind of victory. Continue to push the narrative of truth, see where that takes us. It's got to be better than where we are now.